Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Keith Pascal, UCMDB Worldwide Support Lead. Today we're going to talk about the Discovery User Interface in the CMS UI. This is the new discovery that is goal-based discovery. Let's do a demonstration and show how to set this up. The first thing that I want to do is actually go and make sure in Discovery and Integration in the probe setup that I have a data flow probe set up. You must have a data flow probe set up to use the new Discovery user interface. And I'm going to check my IP ranges. While I'm here, I can see that I have my UCMDB server here. I have some CIs or some IP addresses that are US Mountain and some that are US Pacific. So what I can do in here is I can add these to an IP range group. And I don't have any range groups yet, but I'll set one up. So I'll call this the UCMDB server. I'm going to click on create and then type UCMDB here, and I'll add that one. I want to now add another one for my US Mountain. So I'll click on my three dots, add, create new, US Mountain. And then finally, I will select the last one, the US Pacific, and create an IP range group for US Pacific. So now I've successfully created some IP range groups. Let's go to the Discovery interface. If you've never loaded the Discovery or never started the Discovery in the CMS UI, you're going to see a screen that looks like this that says you don't have any zones, but you can create some, and there's a button for creating new zones. If you don't have a data flow probe installed, this screen won't appear. Instead, it will prompt you that you need to install a data flow probe. So once you have the probe installed, then come back here to this screen and create a new zone. In this case, I'm going to create 3 different zones. The first is just kind of a test zone so that I can show you what this does and how it executes. And then we'll actually go through and do a little bit more advanced kind of zone discovery. We'll do some discovery for the West Coast, which is the Pacific time zone, and we'll do some discovery for the Mountain time zone, and we'll set them up on schedules to run at the appropriate times during that day. And this was much more difficult in previous versions of UCMDB. You had to actually copy an adapter or copy the job into another job and then modify the input TQL so that it only had the IPs you were interested in. It's much simpler in the CMS UI. So let's go ahead and start with our first zone. And I'll call this my first zone, the UCMDB server itself. And we're not going to add all range groups. We're going to add specific ones. Now you can see that in the drop down here, I have the all IP range group, and then I have a probe, and that would select all of the IP ranges that are on that probe. I have this IP range group called UCMDB, which we just added, US Mountain, and US Pacific. I'll select UCMDB and then click off anywhere, and you can see that it's now here. Now, if I wanted to get rid of this, and this is true for any part in this user interface, I could close it and then re-add it, and it's back. Now, I'll click Next. We haven't done any discovery, so we don't know what job groups we're going to use. So we'll have to create a new job group. There's no way around that, but that's all right. We're going to do host application kind of discovery, and the description on this is just discovery of host applications. Now this is zone-based, or not zone-based, it's goal-based discovery, which means you no longer have to understand all the nuances of all the different discovery jobs, meaning that if I wanted to run host applications by shell, previously I would have had to run range IP by ICMP to get the IPs. then host connection by shell to get the shell CI, and then I could run host applications by shell. So I had to know that I needed to run the prerequisite jobs so that I could get this information. In goal-based discovery, that's not the case. It's much simpler in that respect. And so you can discover all sorts of different applications, and you can do some universal discovery agent management in here as well. We'll click network and hosts. Now under the options, I have 3 that are selected out of the box. And I can have my drop down and see what those are. That's network host information, DNS discovery, TCP connectivity, Microsoft domain discovery, firewalls, switches and routers, load balancers. Well, this is just my UCMDB server. It's not a switch and a firewall or a router. I don't need any of that. I just want to get the network and host information for this server. The customize button is where you can go and customize any of the job parameters that you would normally customize on each job. So I've got to pick a ping strategy, either range IP by ICMP, right? Ping the IPs that are assigned to the zone, or I can scan an ARP cache on a switch. I'm going to ping the ones that I've got, and I'm going to use the shell protocols, which I have defined. Right? And now if I wanted to select other jobs or select more jobs to put inside here, I could then click and say, I want also to discover databases. Let's say I'll do some general database detection. I'm not running Oracle on this box. I am running Postgres. I could choose from any of the discovered database types. And then the customize, there isn't anything available to me here with these selections that I've made. This customize would change if I added additional database types. For example, MS SQL Server, and you see that it added 2 new things in here, report DB users on MS SQL database and report storage procedures. So when I get rid of MS SQL, those will go away. This is my discovery. I'm going to click next. Now, the current job that we have created is detecting that there is other jobs that need to be run before I can run some of the jobs that I have in my job group. And so UCMDB has been smart enough to figure that out. And then all you need to do as an administrator is click here to add the missing discovery jobs. So, and it'll be called dependency jobs _ my first zone. And there's a schedule and a credentials group that we can use for each one. If you want to use the same schedule and credentials group, you can hit this toggle box right here. By default, there are 3 intervals, 1 day, 7 day, 14 days. You can add your own schedules here as well, and we will do that. You can also select a credential group, which will be able to add some credentials to the credentials group after we run this initial discovery. I'm going to click next. Now is my first zone, the UCMDB server itself, the UCMDB IP range group, host application, and some dependency jobs for that. And even though this activate zone is selected, the very first time that you save this, it will not activate the zone. The reason for that is that the data flow probe right now is not running in the new discovery mode. It is running in the old discovery mode. It is running the traditional local client kind of a mode. And so when we activate this zone, what's going to happen is the data flow probe will get a notice from the server when the data flow probe connects to the server, and it will find out that we're now running the new discovery flow. And that will require a restart of the probe. So that's going to take a minute, and that's why this activate doesn't actually work the very first time. Now, when I click that save, it says a very important message comes up that says, hey, your new discovery solution is not enabled. Now, it's worth noting that once you enable this, then you can no longer do discovery from the old legacy admin UI. That admin UI being the local client, right? You will do all of your discovery configuration here on the UCMDB server, all right? So once that has happened, this is where you're going to do all of your discovery, is in the CMS UI. You can revert this if you prefer. And that's very simple to do. It's a setting change, and it's documented in our documentation at docs.microfocus.com. So let's click Enable. And now you see a message that says Discovery Zone-based discovery is now enabled. And now on the data flow probe, when it comes to pull the server the very next time, it's going to find out that we are now using the new discovery mode of discovery, right? So it's going to take that probe, shut it down, restart it, reconnect, and then it will be able to start running discovery jobs. So let's go ahead. I'm going to click the Activate button here, and we'll wait for a few moments for it to actually connect. While we're waiting for that, in this discovery zone, we're going to have different types of messages here. That's pending probe, reached probe, success, warning, and error. And you can click on these and drill into them. In the meantime, we're waiting for the probe to actually do its restart. It only restarts the first time that you enable zone-based discovery. It's also worth noting, zone-based discovery is not the same as the management zone-based discovery. This is it's a new thing. All right, so let's go and create in the probe setup. We'll go and create some credential groups. All right, so credential groups are in here. You can see we have a whole bunch of different credentials, and I just wanted to make sure which ones we had here, and then we can go set those up. So in the upper left-hand corner, there's zones. That's this current screen we're on. It will show you all the zones, and there's a card for each zone. It'll show the IP range groups. These are your IP range groups that we have defined. It will show job groups. These are the jobs that we have just created here. I created this host application one, and then it created the dependency jobs for that. There's also schedules that are in here. Remember the three that we saw, 1 day, 7 day, and 14 day. There's also credential groups. Right now, there's only one called all credentials. So I'm going to add one. And let's say that in my environment, the US Pacific zone uses slightly different credentials than the US Mountain zone. So I'm going to create a credential group for US Pacific. And my US Pacific group is going to contain an SSH protocol. One of these NT-CMDs is used for one zone, but not for the other. I'll use this SA, and I'll use Postgres. I click Save. I now have a credential group. Now let's make one for US Mountain, because our Mountain group has also a set of credentials. So US Mountain, this is a second data center, and it uses this NT-CMD protocol, the same database protocols, and the same SSH protocol. So we'll save that. So now I'm using two different protocols in two different areas, and that's fine. So let's go to schedules. And traditionally, users want to run discovery usually after hours, right? Although sometimes some discoveries must be run during business hours, because maybe that's when the activity that you're trying to track is being done. So we can set up some schedules here. To set up a new schedule, click the New Schedule button, give it a name. I'm going to call this US Pacific, and we'll call it Morning Discovery. All right, so this is the discovery that I want to kick off on the US Pacific time zone every morning, first thing, right? 8 o'clock in the morning. Now I can say I want to use the time zone that the data flow probe is in, or I can specify which time zone that is. Well, US West is GMT -8. GMT minus 8. All right, so that's the one we'll use there. And I want to repeat this every day. And I want to start it at a specific time. And so you can see it automatically fills in my current time. What I'm going to select here is on this calendar, I can say I want to start it next Monday or something along those lines. I'll leave it selected as today. And I'm going to say that I want to start it at 8 a.m. Right, so you can just use these plus and minus buttons to set that time, and then click on the clock again. Now it's set for 8 a.m. and maybe I want this to end by a certain time. And let's say I want to end it by, say I want to end it by 5 o'clock, which is 1700 hours. There we go. And I'll allow discovery to run anytime between those two times. Okay, so that's US Pacific morning discovery. We'll add another one for US Mountain morning discovery. And let's say we want to start that one. This time, instead of the time zone of the data flow probe, I want US Mountain time. Well, US Mountain time is GMT minus 7. That's in Denver. Okay, so I'm going to start at the Denver time. Now I can click on here. It's a little bit trickier and type a number. So I typed an 8. I can double click this and type 0. So I want it to start at 8 a.m. Or I can use this clock icon, right? And I want it to end by, and I'm going to pick still today, and I want to end it by, once again, 1700 hours. In here, you have to click the up and down buttons. Okay. And I'll always can run inside that time zone. Save. Now, usually customers would also want to run some kind of discovery at after hours, right? So US Pacific after hours discovery. And I want to use, once again, Pacific time for that. And let's start that today. And let's say that we want to do it at 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock's a good time. And I don't need to have an end time for it, right? As long as I know when it's going to start, I'll save that. And now I'm going to make one more that is US Mountain after hours. And once again, the time zone is going to be the Denver time zone, right? GMT minus 7. Now I could also do this in, repeat every X number of hours, days, minutes, that kind of thing, right? I'm doing it once a day, and it could be an interval, it could be daily, weekly, monthly, or I could put in a cron schedule in here. I want to do an interval. And once again, I'm going to start at 5 o'clock. So let's say 1700 hours, and then I keep clicking the minus button until I get to 0. And then I click the clock again. There we go. And I will save that. Now I've got some discovery schedules. So I've got some credential groups. I've got some schedules. The job groups I tend to create while I'm creating the zone, although you can go in here and look and see what jobs are in those job groups. Let's see what the dependent jobs are. Host resources applications by shell is the dependent job that it decided it needed to run along with these jobs to get the information that I wanted to get. IP range groups, we've got some of those. So let's set up the US Mountain Discovery and the US Pacific Discovery using their appropriate credentials and their appropriate schedules. Now you can also see that we've got some CIs that have reached the data flow probe, right? So when you click on one of these, if I clicked reached, for example, I will see triggers that are in the status of reached probe. Now there is a filter, and you can see it up here in the upper left. If I click on that filter icon, It's looking at this zone plus the status must be equaled reached. Okay, so that's only going to show these. I can remove this from here if I wanted to, right? Just to show all of the triggers. Well, right now they're all in just reached, right? And here's our IP address. Here is our probe. Here's our host name. Here's our IP address. And these are the different jobs that we're running. So let's go back to the zones. Once again, I could also click on this total down here, and now there's only one filter, and that is the filter, the zone name equals my first zone. Okay, I can also add a filter right here if I wanted to. For example, say that the status was reached or success or pending, and apply that. And now I'm looking at my first zone only, and only these statuses, pending, success, or reached. And you can see that I still see my 3. I only actually have 3 at the moment, but that's what you're seeing. Currently, there is one discovery result. I can click on this, and it is an IP address. Here's the display label, the probe name, what zone it was discovered by, what UCMDB routing domain is, and let's say I wanted to know the IP address type, right, or the IP lease time, and type. As soon as I click the checkbox, they show up, right? So that's very fast, very responsive. And actually now you can see that I've discovered more than 3. It keeps adding them as it's doing its discovery, right? Now there are 20 results. So, and I can click on these results and look at the IP addresses, or those are DNS servers, interfaces, IP addresses, subnets. So, and I can walk through the information. And right now we're still taking that data and inserting it back into UCMDB. So the columns aren't all completely there, but they are in process. Let's go and create another zone. So we're going to create a new zone, and this zone is going to be called US Pacific Morning Discovery. And let's say this is the morning discovery jobs. All right, I'm going to select just the Pacific time zone, or the Pacific IP range group. I'm going to click next. In the job group, I am going to select either a job that I've already created, or I could create a new job group. Let's create a new job group called Morning Discovery. And in the morning discovery, maybe the thing that we're looking for in that morning discovery is some kind of inventory job, right? And I can do scanner-based inventory, or I can do host resources and applications. I'll do host resources and applications. I'll use shell protocols. From the host, what do I want to get? Disk, CPU, I can get drivers, iSCSI, maybe I want my fiber channel HBAs, shares, I can collect installed software. I don't want to do, well, I'll get installed software and running software, both. Services and processes. So let's go with services as well. As I select those and put the blue checkbox on them, they're going to show up underneath here. And maybe one of the things that I don't want to get is a share. So maybe I'll click that and it'll go away. Now I can select more information here if I wanted to, but this is sufficient for my morning discovery, right? And let's call this US, let's just say host resources and applications by shell. And that's what we'll put in the description. Now I'm going to go ahead and click next. The schedule I want to use. Now, first of all, it's saying there's something that you're missing here. So let's click there so we can add our Pacific morning dependency jobs. Let's go ahead and apply the same schedule. Now the schedules I've got are the U.S. morning after hours, U.S. mountain morning discovery, U.S. Pacific after hours, Pacific morning, right? So the ones that I want to do for this morning discovery are the Pacific morning discoveries with the U.S. Pacific credentials group. I'll click next and it'll give me a summary. So U.S. Pacific morning discovery using the U.S. Pacific range group with the U.S. Pacific morning discovery schedule and the U.S. Pacific credentials. Once I save this, it is activated. It will activate. Okay, you see this is slotted over into the activate position. So this job is running. Now, let's go ahead and make one more, which is the U.S. mountain morning discovery. Right, so we're on the zones page already. I'll click new zone. And this is the U.S. mountain morning discovery. And I'm going to use the U.S. mountain IP range groups. Next, we'll go to the job groups. Now, I've already decided which jobs I wanted to run, which was the morning discovery. And then there was a dependency jobs of those, right? If I don't select this, if I just leave it morning discovery, it's now going to create yet another dependency group for these jobs. I could also select that dependency job. I can say I want to run both of these. Now, keep in mind, I'm running the same jobs with the same parameters that I ran them in the other zone, but I'm going to use new IP ranges, new credentials in this zone, and I didn't have to, mess with any trigger equals or anything like that in order to get this done. I'm going to apply the same schedule, and I will use U.S. mountain morning hours, and I will use the U.S. mountain credential group. Next, here's my summary, U.S. mountain morning discovery, and this is my discovery for the AM hours. It uses U.S. mountain, and these this dependency jobs U.S. Pacific, the morning discovery, which uses the mountain morning discovery and U.S. mountain credential groups. I'm going to save that, and now I have the U.S. mountain morning discovery. Now you can see that discovery is chugging along, doing the things that it needs to do as we have reached whatever times it is that we're supposed to be doing the discovery. Had I had a discovery set up that actually went later in the day, that would have waited until the appropriate time to be dispatched. It would get to the reached status on the probe, but then it would not continue. And so all the triggers are chugging along. I can go up here and I can click on the discovery results. And now I see my 4 CPUs that I discovered. I see a disk device that I've discovered. And now that all the data has been reconciled and it's in UCMDB, it's easy to be displayed, right? I can look at the file system exports, IP address that's on here, and the node that was created. And once again, I can select different columns. Maybe I want to look at BIOS UUID. And as soon as I add that, it will be added. All right, so here's my BIOS UUID. Now I can close this and I can go back over here and I can take a look at my discovery jobs that have run. So here's my range IP by ICMP job. It finished with a status. Well, it's currently the database TCP ports job. It's still running. It's still on the reached probe status. This one is a success. That was range IP by ICMP. This one is my NT-CMD, host connection or host resource and application by shell. And it's got a problem. It has a warning, right? So to find out what that warning is, I can right click this and then click the show error details. And it will say failed to discover processes by NT-CMD. Okay, so for whatever reason, maybe my credential didn't have permissions to do that. I can view the communication log that was generated as a result of this job if there was a communication log that was configured to be done, which on warnings, I think it generates a communication log. Oh, no, it does not. But it does ask you, hey, the communication log is disabled in the TTY HR all, which is the adapter name for this particular adapter. So I'm going to close this. What I can do if I want to get a communication log is I can rerun with communication log, or I can rerun with communication log and record results. So I'm going to go ahead and run this one. I'm going to record the results. So now the rerun of this particular trigger has started, and it's going to run. It will create a communication log, and it will also create the result vector in the bottom of the communication log. Oftentimes, when you're talking to a support engineer like myself, we will request that you give us a communication log that has the result vector in it. That result vector is very useful for our debugging purposes. You can see now that this has reached the probe, and it is in the process of being run. Now, this one is run. It was range IP by ICMP. I can right click on this and I can show the triggered results for that CI. Right? That ran and it got one IP address for me at this time. And once again, I can select which columns are active. I go back to the zones, I can see that now I have 2 reached here. I've got 1 successful guy over here. I've got some successes and I've got some errors over here. But I have 1,254 results out of this US Pacific morning discovery. So very interesting there. I could actually take a look at what are my error messages and how might I remediate those. And it is useful for the administrator to do that as part of their daily activities, is kind of to take a look at all the different things that you've got going on in discovery and see where are your errors. And that can easily be seen from this CMS UI interface. All right. I want to thank you for your time. This has been an overview of the new UCMDB discovery in the CMS UI for UCMDB. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic day.